This is Channels Television. Please stay with us as we bring you a live coverage of the national dialogue on homegrown parliamentary system of government from the nation's capital in Abuja.
This is a live Channels Television event.
Tradition of their societies, each adapting in ways that ensure no individual holds enough power to ignore the will of the people. This unique flexibility has allowed parliamentary systems to work and reflect the ideals of the diverse nations, and it enables the removal of ineffective leaders through votes of no confidence, unlike the rigidity of the presidential system, where impeachment is often strenuous, expensive, and divisive process. Our duty as political office holders, who have been privileged to see the full spectrum of politics in this system, is to mobilize all stakeholders in our pursuit of a functional nation. This is why we are hosting this national discourse on a governance structure, one that's inclusive of all Nigerians, from random trader in the market to a university professor to a respected traditional ruler. To foster youth engagement, the Parliamentary System Group launched a national essay competition inviting young Nigerians to contribute their thoughts on this pressing issue, and the winner will be unveiled today. Our ambition is to create a platform that accommodates all Nigerians. We need a platform that earns the trust and confidence of all stakeholders for this vision to materialize. Our goal at the Parliamentary System Support Group is to pave the way for the adoption of a governance model tailored towards our specific needs, one that integrates historical insights and cultural values, one that can fulfill our highest aspirations. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, what we are advocating today is not new intervention in the life of this great nation. We are the heirs of courageous ancestors who fought for our right to question the status quo, our right to think of for ourselves. What we are doing today is simply the manifestation of decades of aspirations and to resolve to finally bring our ideals to life. We are not naive of the difficulties ahead or the opposition we might face from vested interests, but this is a train heading towards a future rich with possibility, a future where the government is truly of the people, by the people, and for the people. Thank you very much, and welcome to this national discourse.
That is the agenda setting for this very important national dialogue. And I'd like that we please applaud him one more time for has set the tone. Thank you very much indeed. Let me also mention that the co-chairman for this national dialogue, Pa Ayo Adebanjo, the leader of the Afenifere Yoruba social-cultural group, is joining us virtually, and a host of other dignitaries. So we'd like to welcome them, Pa Ayo Adebanjo and a host of others. Can we please give them a round of applause because they've joined us virtually? And I also like to recognize the presence of some of our members of the House of Representatives that have just joined us. Honorable Okbara Ibezim is here with us. Honorable Ango Abdullahi Sadiq is also here with us, as well as Honorable Jajari Mohammed, all members of the House of Representatives. Can we welcome them? Just as we also recognize the former Minister of Science, Technology and Digital Economy, just joining us, Professor, I'll get to recognizing him afterwards, just bear with me a minute. Let me recognize that the former governor of Kano State as Professor Ali Pantami. Can we welcome him with a round of applause, please? He's here with us. Thank you so much for joining us. I also want to mention that the former governor of Kano State, who was also former Minister of Education, Nigeria, is here wearing two caps. He's here on his own, and then he's also the chairman of the League of Northern Democrats, and he was specially invited here officially as the chairman of the League of Northern Democrats. I'm talking about Senator Ibrahim Shekarau. Please let's welcome him one more time with a round of applause. Thank you, and thank you very much indeed. Having listened to the tone setting by Representative Abdulsamad Rabiu, Dasuki, I beg your pardon, it is now very pertinent, and I consider it very expedient at this juncture to then invite the chairman of this occasion, who would speak to us very briefly, after which we invite the co-chair, who is joining us virtually, to also lend his voice to this very national discourse. And it is in the light of that that I'd like that you please join me in welcoming to the podium the chairman of this occasion. Let's please welcome Professor Ango Abdullahi. I can hear that applause. You're welcome, sir. Can we give him another round of applause just before he gets to the podium? Professor.
Thank you. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. All other protocols observed. It's my honor and privilege to stand before this august group of people who have gathered on an important issue today. I'm sure you will appreciate that some of us who have been invited here perhaps should be in the museum by now, by virtue of the number of days and months and years that were spent on this planet. To be the chairman or co-chairman of this occasion is a great honor and great privilege for me. Having been born a Nigerian, but a British Nigerian, in the sense that those of us who are born before 1914, or those of us who are born after 1914 up to 1960, could describe ourselves in various forms and terms. I, having been born 86 years ago, I was born a Nigerian British Nigerian. That's what I was. And I believe there are quite a few of us here who are British Nigerians. And up to 1960, when Britain left us alone to manage our affairs, we were such. And for me, really, I've seen Nigeria as a British colony administered by the British people. And they decided in 1914 to invite some of our elders to a meeting where some far-reaching decisions will be taken in terms of the future of the country. And by that, I mean the promulgation edict that was discussed in 1914 included 6 eminent Nigerians, or 6 eminent people, because at that time, before the meeting, they were not Nigerians. It was after the 1914 that we assumed a new name or a name referred to as Nigeria. If you read that edict, for those of you particularly with penchants for law, like Dogara would see the content of that edict. It was an edict because it was a decision mainly by former British military officers who were governing us, in various ways in the country as a colony. And they couldn't have used any other term than an edict. And after that edict was approved in the meeting, this was then referred to the colonial office, and it was adopted that this new nation was then born. Nigeria was born by that declaration in the edict. So, for those who are curious like me, I read quite a bit of that edict, and it was an edict of hope that the Nigerians that were colonized from Lagos to southern part up to the northern part in 1903 would now be regarded as a country, and that country would be named Nigeria. It is of interest to hear that maybe I'm wrong here, historians are here. It was the governor, the wife of a governor, or I think the Governor General, that in fact gave us our name, Nigeria. Now, the content of that edict was simply that the people that have been put together under that edict and called Nigeria and the people within Nigerians will now move forward and over the years build a country that they could call their own, and others will also respect as a country different from theirs. And I think that the edict was very clear. In fact, it said the life of the edict was just 100 years. The edict will expire after 100 years. So technically and statistically, this edict expired in 2014, exactly 100 years after. But we did not do anything in a very special way to say that that edict no longer existed and so on, but it was there. But the content was very, very important. And if you read the content, you then consider why we're here today as very, very important. The elements in the edict were simply that the people who were conquered by the British from the southern part of Nigeria, Lagos and others, including the north, of course, are now agreed that they are going to build a country. And this country will be called Nigeria. And they should be working very hard to make sure that they succeeded. And from time to time, they should create opportunities to assess the kind of progress that was being made towards that objective of building a country. And took it that they were doing that, particularly when we get back to the point when our first generation leaders in the country were working towards getting Britain out as a colonial master towards our independence. And they did extremely well, in my view. They worked together, coming from different places and so on. Just as we are still from different places today, they were even more in different places at the time when they decided that they should get themselves together and see whether they can really produce a good country for all of us. And they did. No. So I think that if you look at what they did, one of the quotations that I always use, particularly when people are quarreling about themselves, where do you come from, what language do you speak, which place of worship do you attend, weekly or daily, as the case may be. The Sadhana came with the idea that we can't all melt into one tribe. We can't all melt into one language. We can't melt all in one faith just because we want to be called Nigerians. No. So the important thing is for people from these different backgrounds and different antecedents and so on, is to continue to dialogue and understand their differences. Once they can understand their differences, they should be able to work together towards building a country. And this was the spirit behind their working together up to the point Nigeria had achieved independence. Not that Sadhana ceased to be a Fulani man, not that Chief Awolowo ceased to be a Yoruba man, no Zik ceasing to be an Igbo man. But they worked together because they tried to understand their differences. And these differences will always be there forever, more or less. There is nothing you can do about it. It is not your work, the creation of Almighty. And in the various scriptures, I'm not good in all the scriptures, they said, we created you in different nations and so on, so that you can understand each other and live together. So here, I think that going back to the main theme of this dialogue, what is dialogue about? Dialogue, as the master of ceremony has eloquently described, is a situation where you sit down, discuss, and try to resolve matters that are not quite clear to many or are not understood by many, and so on and so forth, so that you can eventually get closer together in your understanding of issues that are of importance to all of us. And this is where we are today. As I said, I was born a British Nigerian, as many of us here are. In 1961, the British left us. But even then, I think the Queen remained our head of state until another declaration was made, I think in 1962 or thereabout, for Nigeria to become a republic, so that the headship of government returns fully to the people of Nigeria. Now, those who captured us or conquered us left behind a system that was familiar to them. This is the British parliamentary system, was what was bequeathed to Nigeria at independence. And we can't deny that. And we accepted it. Our leaders went to all sorts of conferences within and outside the country to accept parliamentary system of government, and they tried it. And for some of us who saw it and were part of it, we think it worked for us. It worked for us. The system they left behind was a federal parliamentary system where there is a federal government and there are original governments. And the region I come from, or I came from, I still come from, is northern Nigeria. And when I started my public service in 1964 after graduating from Ibadan, I started in the north. The north had its own constitution, like the west had its own constitution, the east had its own constitution. There was a federal constitution. And all appeared to be working in harmony, and things were going on fairly well until some, perhaps people a little more in a hurry, decided that that system was not working, and it was overthrown. Some would say that was the beginning of a crisis. I would say yes and no to this, because after we discovered our mistakes and the tragedy that befell us after that, we should have thought again, why did we fail if we failed under the parliamentary democracy that we accepted at independence? Why? Why did we fail, if we failed at all? Why did the young boys who decided to uproot it do so? And so on. These are the various questions that ought to have been resolved very, very clearly. But unfortunately, for a number of reasons, this was not the case. The country almost broke up. And thanks to some elders and some soldiers, Nigeria remained after 1966, but without continuing a crisis that ended us up in a civil war, which again was eventually resolved. General Gowon, head of state at 34 years, who led the country for 9 years, did extremely well together with elders in his cabinet, or rather in his government, rather than cabinet. There are elders, Shifawolo, Malamini Kano, and the rest of them were working very closely with General Gowon that made it possible for him to run this country for 9 years, including the crisis we went through in the Civil War. It is of interest to note that for those 9 years, Nigeria did not borrow a kobo from outside. You wonder why. But that's not for me, but for the dialogue people to really unravel a lot of things that have gone wrong since then. Never mind what happened. Then, after Gowon's 9 years, there was a decision to reverse to what people call democracy. Democracy has very elastic meaning. Every country in the world today claims democracy. America claims democracy. China claims democracy. Most countries claim democracy. So democracy must have multiple meanings, flexible meanings, and so on. So it's right for us here to ask what kind of democracy do you want to have? And it's also right to insist that we can have a homegrown democracy. And our children who are versed at a lot of things should be able to do so. But then there was a transition between military and civil rule, and there was a disagreement in terms of how this should happen. And to my mind, that was our first major mistake. I was a candidate. I was one of those who should have been in the Constituent Assembly of 1975-76 to discuss the constitution that was transition us from military rule to civil rule. I remember our elders then, Malam Aminu Kano and others, who gather around in Lagos to say that the military leaders have insisted that there will be no discussion on parliamentary democracy. The Constituent Assembly was not to discuss parliamentary democracy. The Constituent Assembly should go and borrow or find a presidential system outside the country. I think what they had in mind, and I think up to now, the two parliamentary systems that are a little all over the place, American and the French. And eventually we opted for the presidential system. Well, to my mind, America has just had an election a few days ago. And to my mind, it did not demonstrate democracy. It demonstrated election, but it did not demonstrate democracy. For me, that was our first mistake, for us to bring a system that did not fit our history, did not fit our traditions, did not fit our experience either as under colonial government or under our own independent state. We did not. Yet, we were not allowed to even discuss it. If I can remember here, my classmate, a very eloquent sociologist, Dr. Ibrahim Tahir, up to his death, he insisted that it was a mistake for us to bring in American presidential system to Nigeria because it will not work for us. And if the parliamentary system had not worked for us, just after using it for 5 years, now we have experienced presidential system for 24 years. Dogara is here to testify. 24 years. With due respect, I think our situation is worse than under the parliamentary system that we rejected just after trying it for 4 or 5 years. So this dialogue here should really be as objective, dispassionate as possible, to look at some of the things that we did wrongly. And one of the things we did wrongly was to bring in a system that did not fit our situation. And if we can, and we should, and we can, we should work out something. It may not necessarily be the typical parliamentary system you find in our former colonial masters. It could be something else, but definitely the presidential system has not worked for us. And it should be possible for us to be less sentimental, more objective in really bringing this out clearly. And there are questions I would like to ask, especially those who would be on the panel to tell us yes and no. I will ask these questions later to illustrate the point that the presidential system has failed Nigeria over the last 24 years, and there is need for us to change to something else. Thank you very much.
Please, can we give the distinguished chairman of this occasion another round of applause? If you ask me, he has actually put it very succinctly there. And it means, yes, the presidential system of government hasn't worked for us in Nigeria, the American model. But let me also recognize very quickly the presence of Honorable Barrister Aminu Shehu Shagari. We'd like to welcome you. Thank you so very much for joining us. We have Professor Sam Amadi, one of our panelists, and is also the former chairman of Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. We'd like to welcome you. Barrister Chimdi Neliaku is SA to the Speaker on Interparliamentary Affairs and doubles as the co-chairman analysis for LMI, the Leadership Mentoring Initiative, as was initiated by the former Speaker, who is now Chief of Staff to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Honorable Bajabia Mila. Let's put our hands together for all these distinguished persons that we've recognized. Thank you very much for joining us. I think we move on now very quickly. Time is of the essence, and I also must mention that we are live on the network service of Channels Television. So this program is been beamed live to the entire world. At this juncture, Mr. Chairman, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to then invite for the unveiling of the essay winners and subsequently presentation of the essay, I'd like to welcome Professor Idoba Omorege, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who doubles as the Vice Chancellor Designate, University of Benin. Please, a warm round of applause for him as he makes his way here.
Mr. Chairman, please permit me to stand on the established order of precedence. My task is to unveil the essay winners. At the beginning of this discussion about transiting from presidential system to parliamentary system, back in 2018, we thought of many things. And one of what we thought of is to get in the younger generation to join in this dialogue. Because we believe, as Right Honorable Dasuki has said in his presentation, that we must be transgenerational on this issue. So it will not be just an adults or old men or old women discussion. And so we called in essays from young Nigerians, particularly those who we believe are in a position to fully understand the nature of the discussion. And we agree that we'll do that through the undergraduates of our tertiary institutions. And so we called them, and over 1,000, surprisingly, over 1,000 entries were received. And after we did the evaluation, we came to the conclusion that 3 very brilliant young Nigerians, fully meet the criteria we set. And so it's my honor and privilege to unveil these 3 very, very intelligent Nigerians. So I'll be calling on Andy once again to announce those who made the grade. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the unveiling. And in unveiling them to you, would like to, at this point in time, mention the names of the winners. Miss Nabila Sule is of the University of Ilorin, and she came third. Please, a round of applause for her. The second position went to Mr. Henry Chukura from the University of Calabar. Please, a round of applause for him. And the very first position went to Ms. Mujibat Idris of the Crescent University, Abeokuta. She's joining us virtually and online as well. Please, a round of applause for her. And thank you very much indeed. And to now speak on behalf of all of them by way of presenting the essay, would like to invite Mr. Henry Chukura from the University of Calabar. Henry Chukura, please, a round of applause for him as he comes this way. Please endeavor to accept that the order of precedence as established is also being adopted by you, so that we can move at the speed that this event deserves. Henry Chukura.
The chairman, esteemed dignitaries, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The order of precedence is duly observed and adopted. My name is Henry Chukura. I am a student of the University of Calabar. I'm deeply honored to have my essay selected as one of the top 3 entries in the Parliamentary System Support Group Essay Competition. I wish to express my gratitude to the panel of judges and the committee for giving me this opportunity to share my perspective on a topic so important to the future of our dear country, Nigeria, and on a platform as grand as this national dialogue. The title of my essay is Presidential versus Parliamentary System of Government, the Way Forward for Nigeria. The essay is divided into 6 parts. The introductory part of the essay highlights the peculiar nature of our country, Nigeria. It also goes down memory lane into the political history of Nigeria, from the pre-independence era to the military era in 1966. It also touches on the advent of the presidential system of government in 1999. The second part of the essay presents an overview of Nigeria's current presidential system of government, outlining its origins and acknowledging it being a striking model of the American system of government. This section of the essay also recognizes separation of powers as the major strength of the presidential system of government, even though, of course, it had its own criticisms. The third segment of my essay introduces the basics of the parliamentary system of government, detailing its modus operandi and evidencing the presence of a parliamentary system of government in the political evolution of Nigeria. The essay also outlines some celebrated benefits of a parliamentary system of government, like inclusivity, accountability, adequate checks and balances, and also reduction of the high cost of governance in Nigeria. The fourth part of the essay makes a comparative analysis between the presidential system and the parliamentary system of government, juxtaposing both of them in a bid to weigh their pros and cons against each other. The fifth part of the essay addresses the challenges and considerations a transition to a parliamentary system of government is likely to pose, such as the need for early sensitization of the masses and the need for constitutional amendment amidst significant political resistance for those who may not be in tandem with a transition to a different system of government. In summary, we cannot help but admit that a transition to a parliamentary system of government presents significant challenges. However, a parliamentary system of government is still the most viable option for a country as diverse and culturally unique as Nigeria, as it would go to reduce our cost of governance while increasing accountability and inclusivity for all. Although hindsight has taught us to avoid verbatim duplications of other systems of government, we can still afford to take dressing from other nations practicing a parliamentary system of government successfully, like India and Canada, although we'd have to tailor this to fit our unique political reality in Nigeria. I strongly believe in a parliamentary political future for Nigeria, and although it might be long and grueling, events like this national dialogue is a step in the right direction. Once again, thank you all for your time and attention. May God bless us all, and may God bless Nigeria. Please enjoy the rest of the event.
Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like that we fix our gaze on the LED screens for a very brief presentation. Can we have that roll now, please? Thank you. And the vase you're going to be seeing is the first prize winner from the Crescent University, Abeokuta. A round of applause for her, please.
It's everybody's business. This simple principle captures the essence of democracy, a system where power and responsibility not only lies with the elected officials, but also with the entire population. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mujiba Idris, an undergraduate of the prestigious Aregbesola College of Law, Crescent University, Abeokuta, and here is my contribution to the National Dialogue on a Homegrown Parliamentary System of Government, organized by the Parliamentary System Support Group. Thank you, Parliamentary System Support Group, for selecting my essay as one of the best 3 in this dialogue. Nigeria has experienced many changes in its quest for stable democracy. After gaining independence from the British colonial rule in 1960, Nigeria adopted a parliamentary system similar to the Britons. This system separated the head of state from the head of government, included multiple executive officials, and held ministers accountable to the legislature. During this time, some regions like the Southwest, under Chief Obafemi Awolowo, saw improvement in education and infrastructure. Awolowo's government introduced free education and health services and built notable structures like the Cocoa House in Ibadan. However, the First Republic also faced ethnic conflict, political instability, and eventually military coups, leading to doubts about the suitability of a parliamentary system of government for Nigeria's diverse political environment. In 1979, Nigeria switched to a presidential system of government influenced by General Olusegun Obasanjo's military regime. This new system aimed to resolve issues like ethnic tensions and corruption by centralizing power in a single leader. Despite initial hopes, the presidential system brought its own problems, including executive overreach and weakened checks and balances. As Nigeria celebrates 25 years of uninterrupted democracy, debates have resurfaced about the best system of governance. Critics argue that the current presidential system is too centralized and inefficient, while supporters of a parliamentary system claim it would be more inclusive, representative, and accountable. This dialogue examines Nigeria's governance history and analyzes whether a parliamentary system could better serve the country's needs. Presidentialism versus parliamentarism. A useful way to compare Nigeria's presidential and parliamentary systems is through familiar comparison.
Let's put our hands together for her as well. She was not able to join us physically because of some health challenges, but I wish her well and speedy recovery. And she's been able to send her goodwill. And of course, we were just about taking her presentation, but because of the length of the presentation, we have decided to just keep it really brief so we can move on with the speed that this event deserves. Your Excellencies, our very distinguished chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we're gradually inching to getting, at this point in time, the keynote address from our very keynote speaker at this National Dialogue on a Homegrown Parliamentary System. We're all aware that subsequent speakers and even scholars across the country have had cause to tell us that we have experimented this presidential system of government for pretty too long, and it doesn't seem to be working for us. And that is why this dialogue is very, very important. And of course, with the tone setting that we got from Honorable Abdusamad Dasuki, also exposes us to understanding that there are things that we can do that will change the narrative. And of course, those are things that are peculiar to us. To quickly speak to us by way of giving us this keynote, I'd like us to please join me in welcoming Dr. Usman Bugaji, who is going to be talking to us very briefly, and I also plead with you to rest on the already established precedents for this event. Thank you very much, sir. If you do that, thank you.
The chairman of this occasion, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I stand on already established order of precedence, and I proceed. Let me start by congratulating the honorable members of the House of Representatives who have thought of this idea as something that has been part of the discussion. It's not my telephone. Let me salute the courage of this group of members who have thought it necessary to bring to the fore a discussion that has been taking place at the background. It requires a lot of courage to push this particular idea forward, and I thought we all should be quite happy that something, this dialogue is taking place, and it's something that we needed. What I thought we should also do is to broaden the dialogue so that we do not just focus on the specific form of government. We should look at governance generally. We should relate it to the history and culture and beliefs of our socio-cultural environment, and also try to look into the future to see exactly what are the challenges and what system of government should we put in place that can address these challenges. I would not want to read something very elaborate. I have a synopsis from which I pick a few points, and probably later, if the need is there, I might put together a full-blown paper. But I thought it's important for the members to look at the history of parliaments. This is necessary because you need to establish the actual role that parliaments have played all through history to date. This is important because today, our parliaments are not playing the role that they should be playing. They have largely become rubber stamps, and they have been part of the problems of this country. You have to extricate yourself from that particular image. You have to have the courage to come out and play that role, which even the Constitution that you're operating has actually given you. This is a very important point. I also think you need to appreciate the fact that democracy, not just in Nigeria, world over, is in crisis today. And you might even say that the crisis of Nigeria is the crisis of democracy. And there is a lot in the literature about the discussion taking place, from America to Australia, across, from Russia down to South Africa. There are lots of work that is being done. I just want to refer you to a conference that took place about 10 years ago in Canberra. And there is a lot about the talk about the crisis that democracy is facing in these across the world. Some of them, for example, the high level of citizen dissatisfaction with politics, the gross lack of political literacy, the low levels of satisfaction in trust in governments and politicians, the decline in the membership of political parties. I remember when I was the National Secretary of the Action Congress, which later became the Action Congress of Nigeria, a visiting parliamentary group from Britain when we had an interaction, I told them we are trying to push for a 3 million voter list because we are trying to push for a membership. They said they envy us that we are even targeting 3 million. They said they are not even sure if they have up to 1 million membership, of their own political parties. So there is this diminishing number of people holding political party cards. And, there is an increasing power of actors without electoral accountability. Such institutions like the central banks, a number of regulatory bodies are playing roles that really Parliament should be playing. So these are things that create the crisis, create the dissatisfactions, create all the problems that we are facing, that in a review of the kind that these honorable members have started, I think should all be included. In the case of Nigeria, and we need to be very careful about this, the last 25 years has not actually given Nigerian citizens what they were expecting from their governments. If anything, 3 major things have happened in the last 25 years that have defined our democracy. One is deepening poverty. You look at the statistics, even if you don't have to go to the World Bank or UNDP, just look at the statistics at the National Bureau for Statistics. You see how poverty has been deepening in the last 25 years. That is not a good commentary for our democracy, and is something that we need to address. You look at the escalating security. 1999 was fairly peaceful despite the transition into the military. But look at what has happened 10 years later, another 10 years later, where we are now. New bandits are arriving into our own land, even as we have not quite finished with the ones that have already shown their faces. So escalating security, mind-boggling corruption. Now, this is a very serious matter. I know it's a bit uncomfortable discussing about it. These are some of the things we prefer to sweep under the carpet, but they will keep coming up because they are a fundamental breach of democratic practices, and they cumulatively undermine the political systems and create the crisis, the kind of which we will not be able to recover. So these are some of the things that I thought you can. I like the idea of the homegrown effort. This is a very key word, because if you borrow a system that has been nurtured in entirely a different history, social, cultural environment, it will not work for you. You're supposed to work your own system. If we keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, we'll become enslaved by ideas and systems that do not quite fit and solve our own problems. And I thought for this purpose, it's very important that we underscore the significance of this. I've made references to books written recently. In fact, one of them that has a very catchy title, The Death of Liberal Democracy by Joy Zamit Lucia and David Boyle, just recently, 2016, and the foreword was given by Tim Farron, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. It says a lot about what is happening. Even within Europe, there is complaint that the liberal democracy that they are practicing does not recognize and take cognizance of the nature of their very societies. So we're not alone in a way, but it's something that we need to really pay a lot of attention to. And here at home, there is a very important book which came out in 1999, just as we are returning back to a civil democratic rule. It was actually a PhD thesis of about 1,000 pages. It was reduced to about a book of about 500 pages by late Dr. Mahmoud Tukur. The title is Leadership and Governance in Nigeria, the Relevance of Values. And he did a comparison between the Westminster parliamentary democracy and the indigenous government processes. He looked at the Sokoto Caliphate, he looked at the Benin, he looked at the Oyo, And he did a marvelous work in trying to bring out those elements that we should be taking into consideration as we construct the kind of government. The point is, and this is a very important point, we as Africans, we need to realize that we're not any less important than any part of the world. We feel so sometimes because the process of colonization that the chairman spoke very well about did rob us of our own history. My generation is a very good example. Until we came to the university, we had no idea of our history. We did history in our secondary school, but it was the history of British in Nigeria, the history of British or Europeans in Latin America, the history of Europe basically in other parts of the world. But we were not told about our own history, who we are. And that was painful. And as you mature and you grow and you interact with ideas, you start asking yourself, then who am I? Where did I come from? Of course, this is why some of us transited. I finished in pharmacy, but I went to do African studies, I went to do intellectual history, partly because we realized that without knowing your history, you have no identity. And what we discovered when we went to read our own history, and we did that not only in, I did that outside this country, and I went to Europe, I went to US, and we discovered amazing things about our own history. And I want to share with you a paragraph of a paper I submitted to Futures Institute in London just a few months back. Just a concluding paragraph, just for you to have a taste of what Africa really was. The part of the paper speaks about the future of Africa is in its past. As many of you know, Africa was the cradle of civilization, and it had hosted great empires like the Carthaginians, which for many centuries BC, that's before Christ, kept Rome, the big Roman Empire, on its toes. From its base, you may have heard about Hannibal. Hannibal was said to be the greatest of these generals, and he operated from Tunisia. Hannibal was the one who took elephants, put them on the ship, and he crossed the Mediterranean, and he used these elephants to fight and defeat the Roman Empire. He was African. Septimius Severus, who ruled from 193 to 211 AD, was said to be the first African Roman emperor, who died in York, in Britain, in 211, in trying to save Britain from the Caledonian tribes. Britain invited him to save it from the Caledonian tribes, and he fought the war, he protected Britain, and he stayed in York. That was where he died. About 7 centuries later, following the spread of Islam, a movement was born in the 1050s, known as the Almoravids. Some of you have read about the Almoravids, which moved into Africa and took over a good chunk of Europe, with its base in Spain, and ruled it for 500 years. It is this movement that sparked off the Renaissance, which pulled Europe out of the Dark Ages into civilization. It is this same awakened Europe that came back to conquer Africa and continued to this day to denigrate it and to exploit it. To be sure, Africa invigorated Europe, not only because it ignited the consciousness which elicited the Renaissance, but also because it was leading in knowledge and technology. It helped individual corporate Europe to meet their needs in that recovery. When Great Britain was excommunicated by the church in Rome following the revolt of King Henry VIII. Some of you would remember he asked for concessions about his marriages, and the Pope granted him one. I think he kept asking until the Pope felt that was enough, and King Henry revolted. That was how the Anglican Church was actually created. The two key polities that helped Britain to survive were the Ottoman Empire and the Morocco. Morocco used to be a very big state. It was the first state to recognize the United States when it declared its independence in 1776. And this is why for many years, I don't know now, Moroccan citizens don't need visa into the United States, because Morocco was the first nation that recognized America when it declared its independence. It was the time of Elizabeth I, the daughter of Henry VIII, and Turkey bought scrap metals from Britain while Morocco supplied the essentials of food, especially sugar. The point here is that Africa was a global player from the time of Rome through the ages, and the more so today, as the West is looking exhausted and with not much to offer to the world. We should also remember that Africa was a cradle of learning. It hosted the world's first university, the Qarawiyyin University in Morocco, which was built in 859, followed by the second university in the world, which is the University of Al-Azhar, which was built in 970, and the third university in the world, that of Sankore in Timbuktu, which is in the current-day Mali, which was built in 989. The fourth and the first in the West was the University of Bologna in Italy, which was built in 1088. All this is just to simply show that Africa was a global player. We taught Europe a number of things. We have no reason to, for anybody to feel that we need to borrow anything from anybody. That does not stop us from taking wisdom wherever we find it. And that does not mean that we have a monopoly of wisdom, but it means that we are a people who have the capacity like every other person, and therefore we should build our homegrown political system that others would be free to come and copy. Africa must go back to its past, understand its history, and reinvent its political and cultural institutions, and create a leadership that has the courage, the character, and the competence to place it on a trajectory of genuine independence where it can deal with the rest of the world as an equal partner in the global community. The prioritization of knowledge is the first step. Indeed, in the 21st century, knowledge is the greatest capital. Let me come back to the issue of democracy. I think we need to understand, as we are engaging in this very important dialogue, that the world, what has actually shaped the world and created all these institutions that we are now fascinated with, are two major human cravings: the crave for freedom and the crave for justice. These are the major powerful forces. I understand my time is up, so let me rush my few points. So we need to understand these two forces. These are the forces that actually created the Magna Carta, which is a very important document, which was created in 1215 by King John, the American Declaration of Independence in 1776, the French Revolution in 1789, and Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. These are all important milestones in the development of the institutions, the world that we are going to be engaging with. Let me come to my final conclusion. I'm sure you will spare me a few minutes too. I think when we come to look at our homegrown system, like I said, we need to broaden the discussion. There are three major things that I think we need to do. One, we need to look at, because I see this process of reinventing our politics. Because our politics today is actually sick, is decaying, it's not delivering. And citizens are agitated that it's not giving them what they are looking for. So it's in our own enlightened self-interest to reinvent it so that it meets the expectations and the aspirations of our own society. And three things we need to look at. First is a new political philosophy. We have to start discussing what is the objective of politics. Is it just personal benefit and self-aggrandizement? Or are there more important goals that politics should play? This is very important. The second thing is new political parties. Our current political parties, if we want to be honest with ourselves, they have no content, they have no conscience, they have no courage. They are not delivering. They are not any different from any one of the other. They're basically all the same. We need to create new political parties with very clear, if you like, intellectual constituencies, with very defined ideals, so that when I move from one party to the other, I will be conscious of the fact that I'm now changing from this particular way of looking at world, to the other. At the moment, it doesn't really mean anything. And this is why it's very easy to come and go out and you don't really know who is who now. Thirdly, and very important, we have to change our political culture. Our political culture is characterized by violence, is characterized by mercantile politics, meaning money, and is characterized by a kind of total disconnect between the actual challenges that are facing this country in the politics that we play. They have to connect, otherwise politics loses its meaning. So we have got to change that political culture. Finally, when Honorable Abdul Samad was making the statement, he did mention a point, I don't know if he reflected on that, that what we are getting is not what we deserve, if I heard him correctly. I just want to say finally, this is my last point, that in the real world, and politics teaches you this, because politics is played in the real world, and that's what academics are missing. When you come to the real world, you meet the real world. In the real world, nobody gives you what you deserve. You only get what you negotiate for. And the currency for that negotiation is power. The good news is that power is not only political, it's not only military. It can be economic, it can be moral, it can be intellectual, it can be demographic. In a democracy, demography is the most important, the most potent source of power. So it's important you take that into consideration as you navigate the very challenging environment of this very important dialogue. I thank you for listening.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Usman Bugajay. He graduated in pharmacy from Aregbesola University in 1975. He did his master's in African Studies and PhD in intellectual history. 1999 to 2003, he was special advisor to the erstwhile president. 2003 to 2007, he became a member of the House of Representatives, and then in 2007 to 2011, he became the National Secretary, Action Congress, which later metamorphosed into becoming Action Congress of Nigeria. Please, another round of applause for him. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Very quickly, would like to recognize the Member House of Representatives who has been here with us, Honorable Kelechi Nwagu, DSSRS. We'd like to welcome you. Thank you so very much for coming. We also have one of our moderators here that I haven't recognized all day, Laolu Akonde, former Special Assistant, Senior Special Assistant to the President, Office of the Vice President, Professor Yomi Oshimbajo, and the host of Inside Sources, television show, a talk show, and a journalist of very, very great repute. Please put your hands together for Laolu Akonde. I also want to mention that The co-chairman of this occasion, Pa Ayo Adebanjo, is still with us virtually. We're hoping that before this event comes to a close, he'll be able to lend his voice to contributing to this national dialogue as well. But very quickly, we'd like to hit the panel of discussions. We have two distinct panels. The very first is going to be X-raying towards a homegrown parliamentary system, exploring a tailored governance model for Nigeria. This speaks to what is expected of us and what should the shape of these conversations be. And to moderate these very panel is a former member of the House of Representatives, former member, Honorable Nnenna Elendu Ukeje. Please a round of applause for her. She comes over to taking her seat on the side of the divide. And while she's making her way here, I'd like to then invite very quickly to join her here for this very first panel. Let's please welcome His Excellency, the Right Honorable Yakubu Dogara, CFR, former Speaker of the House of Representatives. You'll be seated in the middle? Yes. Oh, she's actually a three-term member of the House of Representatives. Please put your hands together for her. She's almost an institution here. Okay, you prefer to be there as the moderator? We were thinking that you take the middle seat so you can look both ways to be able to interact. Yes, you can sit next to Nnenna on that side. But just while this is going on, we welcome the President of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, Engineer Margaret Aino Oguntala, FNSE. We welcome you. Now, moving on, would like to also invite His Excellency Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola, former Governor of Osun State and former Minister of Interior. Please, can I hear that applause for him, please? And also to join them for these discuss, I'd like to invite the Right Honorable Kingsley Chinda, Minority Leader of the House of Representatives. Please, a round of applause for him. You are blessed amongst men. You're sandwiched between two wonderful gentlemen. Please, let's welcome Right Honorable Kingsley Chinda. Please, a round of applause for him. Let me invite then Professor Edoba Omoroge, SAN, Vice Chancellor Designate, University of Benin. Please, a round of applause for him as well. So that Honorable Nnenna doesn't feel too intimidated by the too many men here, which I know she never can get intimidated by men. Let me please welcome another great mind, Barrister Chimdi Neliaku. She's going to be representing the entire youths of Nigeria on this panel, and she's Vice Chairman LMI and SSA to Special Assistant to the Speaker of the House of Representatives on Interparliamentary Affairs. Please, a round of applause for her, please. And I'd like the sound manager to ensure that our microphones are all working. As I'll be yielding, please turn on the mics, please. As I'll be yielding the floor very quickly to the moderator for this session, and I'm told that you have, please, let's have the microphones turned on, please. Thank you very much. The moderator will take charge of affairs for the next 40 minutes, and your time starts now. Thank you very much. There's a round of applause for her.
All right. Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. The order of precedence has already been established. I am indeed, my name is Nnenna Elendu KJ, former member House of Representatives, former chair Committee on Foreign Relations, former chair Committee on International Donor and Civil Societies, and I am very glad to be moderating this panel with this very esteemed array of Nigerians. Continentally, there's a popular saying that we are Africa and Africa is our business. But today we borrow that phrase and bring it home. We're Nigeria and Nigeria is our business. And it appears this must be a light bulb moment for all of us that reminds us that our destiny lies in our hands. We as Nigerians have the responsibility to influence and direct the control the levers that dictate the trajectory of our nation state. This critical conversation has become almost existential, and I think this is as good a time as any to thank the frontline parliamentarians who felt the need to be disruptive, positively disruptive, and bring up this conversation, which hitherto was a no-go area, about the health of Nigeria's democracy today. So, very quickly, based on everything that has been said in the room, and especially the absolutely brilliant keynote address by Dr. Usman Bugaji, I think the conversation for today is very trite. And it asks the question, is the presidential system of government the best for a multi-pluralistic, ethnically devised, religiously divided, mobile country such as ours? Do we practice a system of government that is contextualized towards our development and needs, or are we merely consumers of an algorithm of structures and systems designed for other societies without cognizance to our specialized needs? Does the American-style presidential system of government we practice provide the answers to the leadership questions that many Nigerians constantly ask? Has the system of government we practice shown the ability for the proper management of public finances? Has our system of government shown capacity for effective administrative control, for investment in human capital development of our 220 million strong citizens? Has the system of government we practice shown the capacity to create viable social and economic pathways for our 140 million youth? Has it shown the desire for gender inclusivity and the capacity for the positive exploitation of our collective diversity? Has this system of government been able to harness our natural and cultural assets? Has it been successful at the entrenchment of the rule of law? Has it shown effective capacity to protect our territorial integrity? Does it recognize that the primary responsibility of government is the welfare and security of lives and property of the citizens of this country? So, what it is that we intend to x-ray, I think I've set the tone for this conversation. And the depth and honesty of our conversation is critical if we are to arrive at that which we so desperately desire. To join me in having this conversation is an amazing panel of very distinguished Nigerians. At the very end, we have Ms. Chimdi, who works with the World Economic Forum Global Shapes, and she chairs the Governance, Peace and Security Thematic Working Group of the African Union Youth Preference Committee. She saved this panel from being a manel, and she brings the double minority of both being a woman and being young. Thank you very much for being with us. To my immediate right is Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola, the former governor of the state of Osun and the former Minister of Interior under the immediate past administration. Thank you very much, sir. You're welcome. To my immediate right is my friend and brother and my speaker, the Right Honorable Yakubu Dogara, who was the Speaker of the House of Representatives, 8th Assembly, and I am very glad that you are here. To my next to him, sat next to him, is Honorable Oke Chinda, who is the minority leader of the House, and right now he's one of the frontline parliamentarians that we celebrate for being the initiator of this here conversation. And of course, at the very end is Professor Edoge Omorege-san. He's Professor of Constitutional Law and Governance and Vice Chancellor Designate of the University of Benin. Thank you very much. And of course, everybody in the audience and in the gallery, I thank you very much for being a part of this. So please, could we give them a resounding round of applause for volunteering to be a part of this conversation. Now, to set the scene and for foundational purposes, I'm going to go to my immediate right. I like to start from my right. I'm going to ask Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola. A solid majority of Nigerians have developed deep-rooted pessimism and trust deficits over our system of government, over our democracy. With all the challenges that we face, economic, social, cultural, and security, what would you say is the greatest flaw in our democratic experiment and where Nigeria finds herself today?
Thank you. I appreciate, and I want to say it, I want to verbalize it, the organizers of this. We must commend you for deeming it fit to bring this up and inviting those of us who have invited and the people who are here, eminent Nigerians, to be part of this discussion. It was Alexander Pope who said, "For forms of government, let the fool contend. What is best for the people is simply best." Flowing from your question, there is no doubt, the lead speaker said it, that we have seen a worsening economic, even political, spiritual condition of Nigerians. You don't need to be a nuclear scientist to know that things are progressively getting bad. How? Smaller percentage of Nigerians are now prosperous. It's not as if there is no prosperity, but it's reducing and reducing. When I was born, and at my development, all the things were development, wealth was not as limited to a few number of Nigerians as it is today. And that, what does that signify? It tells us that we are in a deep problem. You see, as to physical sciences are very exact, but social sciences reflect the condition of the people, and that's why it's not exact. So we will not be here discussing this if things are normal in Nigeria. We know, even those who have extremely benefited today know that things are not normal. And in addressing it, as far as I'm concerned, I will not be as rigid as Dr. Bugaje, that look, for rhetorics, for political correctness, yes, you can say homegrown, but human beings are the same everywhere. Hunger is hunger, poverty is poverty. So a bad system is a bad system. Whatever does not give the appropriate opportunity or right to people will be resisted, no matter what you do to prevent it. He mentioned that, he mentioned military rule, he mentioned political system, he failed to mention revolution. That look, if all other things fail, there could be, people can revolt. So if you are conscious of all of this, and we know the consequences of things getting out of hand, it will interest us to see how best to govern ourselves to ensure that our people, and you said it in passing, that the primary responsibility of every government is the welfare and security of the people. When those two things can no longer be guaranteed, forget it. Okay. There can be a stable society. However, please let me conclude. I know I'm taking time. I have looked at, I've studied the issue of Nigeria, how we even came into existence as separate kingdoms, communities, and whatever. If we don't want to relapse into actually what led us into being colonized in the first instance, because some people want to overlook that. That was a weakness that led to our colonialism. It was a weakness. I don't want to go to that issue. If you are strong enough, we would never have been colonized. So we were not strong enough, and that was what led to our own being dominated by others. And part of it is the tyranny of these individual dictators that you call rulers. If you go on believing that a man, a person, no matter how beautiful, no matter how good, who could have the capacity to go out around 20 million people all alone, without checks, we are joking. So, by that consideration alone, I am opposed to executive system of government. I believe a collective arrangement which parliamentary system guarantees is best for a nation like Nigeria, if indeed we are committed to advancing the interests of the large population and mass of our people. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that answer. I mean, what I hear is, of course, security of lives and property and weakening institutions, you would say, is the bane of our democracy today. And on to Honorable Yakubu Dogara. Right Honorable, my apologies. I thought we'd establish the order of precedence, but it's okay. Globally, people are starting to interrogate democracy. In the United States, for instance, interestingly, studies have shown that a staggering 68% of the citizens are dissatisfied with democracy as it is practiced today. So much so that they're looking to their founding fathers like James Madison and wondering whether the outcomes that they have today in the American-style democracy is what was envisaged. In Nigeria, all the speakers before me have highlighted, and of course, Dr. Bugaje says it very succinctly, that we have a declining liberal constitutionalism. And here I draw the difference between democracy and liberal constitutionalism, where the system of government pushes constitutional limits and weakens institutions that are supposed to safeguard the liberties that should be guaranteed by democracy. What do you think can halt this decline? Ogbeni Aregbesola has touched on it, but I want you, as someone who sat atop the House of Representatives, to say to us what you honestly do think can halt this decline.
Okay, thank you very much. I won't begin my intervention without, of course, commending the organizers of this dialogue. I know one of the major problems afflicting our country is the failure of rational discourse. And I will highlight this. Just yesterday, two people called me. One, of course, from the South. He said, I heard that you're going to engage in this dialogue. But my presupposition is that the bill itself in the National Assembly is sponsored by somebody from Southwest, as a matter of fact, from the president's state. Now, don't you think that this is President Tinubu's attempt at third term, so that after he's completed his tenure in a presidential democracy, he can now transit to a prime minister? I said, well, I did not dispute this. I believe it's a valid observation. But I pray you come to this forum and raise these observations. It should be taken as some of the issues that can be resolved if we agree that moving or transiting to a parliamentary democracy is better than us. It's better for us, sorry. And the only challenge is that someone is trying to use it in order to further his own personal agenda. I think we can resolve that by just a phrase, not even a proviso in the Constitution that we'll craft after this. And then I got another call from someone who said, can't you see that this thing is led by Honorable Abdul Samad, who is from the Caliphate? They want us to go back to parliamentary democracy so that the North can always produce the prime minister. And that was the problem why we abandoned this system, this parliamentary system of government. I said, well, maybe it's a legitimate point, but I wish you can come to the forum and make this observation. I believe you will agree that that is the only problem, but that the parliamentary democracy is better for us. We can resolve it. So this informs us about how difficult it is in the context of our country to hold a rational discourse such as this. But let's delve into the issues she has raised. I hope I have some time. Yeah, you have 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Yes. I won't be able to say what I want to say in 2 minutes, but let me attempt. Yes, let me attempt to say that. You see, everything about societal progress boils down to leadership. And leadership is not a job. It is a responsibility. That is where we get it wrong. Responsibility to take accountability for yourself as a leader and then to be able to hold those serving for you or with you accountable. It is about ensuring or insisting that everyone around you play according to the rules, which is fairness, and then holding accountable those that do not, which is justice. You see, the major problem with the presidential system of government that we practice now is not the fact that we borrowed it from the US. I can tell you that for free, that those who copied from the American Constitution didn't do a wonderful job. And I got to know this in my undergraduate days. Before I left the university, the thesis I worked on was the vertical and horizontal distribution of powers under the American and Nigerian Constitution, a comparative analysis. That was the topic. And I was supervised from someone who has PhD and an American, Professor Austin. Later, he was Dr. Austin then, when he supervised me. And he made available to me the founding documents, the arguments, the Federalist Papers, all of them at that age. I studied them and saw which part of the American Constitution we took and which one we abandoned. And the problem with the presidential system of government is buried in those differences or derogations that those who copied and created and carved the 1979 Constitution, which we are practicing with some amendment, made. So it is not the American system that we copied 100%. I'll give you two examples. In the US, for instance, well, impeachment of the executive is real. It can happen. Even judges can be impeached. And the provision is the House that carries out impeachment both of the executive and members of the judiciary, while the Senate tries them. And if they are convicted in the Senate, they are removed, and it is real. But in the Nigerian Constitution, Section 143 doesn't provide anything about impeachment. It just mentioned it. Let me make this point and then I'll close there. It just mentioned it because at the end of the day, everything the National Assembly has done, it will be handed over to a committee of 7, they call them people of impeachable character. I don't know where we can find assemble these angels in the context of Nigeria. And then their determination is final. It cannot even be queried by the National Assembly or any court in Nigeria. And then these 7 people of impeccable characters are appointed by the Chief Justice of the Federation, who himself is an appointee of the president. How do you make this thing real, this impeachment of a thing? So without this sanction, sorry, we don't have the office of the Independent Counsel in Nigeria. Just all this issue of contradictory judgments coming from the court. In the US, it can be dealt with. But in Nigeria, no. Because the power to deal with judges rests in the NJC. So that is in breach of the laws or rules of natural justice, where the judiciary get to determine what should happen to members of their own profession that are found wanting. And I say this last, maybe to elicit some laughter. At the meeting of Body of Benches, after we were done, journalists were trying to interview me about what was happening in the judiciary. And I did say then that I'm a member of this profession. You can say I belong to this highest body. I shouldn't be seen to be litigating the issues I have openly. I will advise in-house. Then a senior brother of mine, a retired federal court judge, said, my younger brother in Hausa Kanina, that I'm impressed with your comment. You know why? I said, no. He said, because if your mother is a prostitute, you should be the last person to see it, or they must never hear it from your mouth. So the problem we have is lack of accountability, Any system that we will build that will not make the people in power fear the people, but the people instead will be afraid of those in power, is an imperial democracy. It will never work. It will never produce any result. I stop there.
All right. Thank you very much, Right Honorable Dogara. I'll just quickly comment on the two people who called you. And I think that that is a consequence of the damage that has been done to our collective national psyche rather than what obtains. So I also agree with you to a large extent that the elected must always must be held accountable by the people. But then, of course, in every democracy, there are three groups of people. There's the elected, there's the citizens, and then there is also the gatekeepers. And if any of these three people drop the ball, then we have the damage that we have. Because the citizens are as guilty of not holding to account the elected as guilty of not doing that which they must do. I'd go very quickly to my vice chancellor. By the way, he was my vice chancellor. I attended the University of Benin, and I'm very proud to have you on this panel and to be sat here speaking with you. Now, I want to go back to history. And in the First Republic, Nigeria practiced the parliamentary system of government, and everybody has highlighted it. It is said that the parliamentary system of government can be extremely polarizing. As a matter of fact, it is said that the First Republic was the beginning of ethnic politics and that dovetailed into post-election violence in Nigeria. So today, the Nigerian society is divided almost irredeemably along religious, ethnic, economic, and social lines, and politics and democracy is almost a rite of passage that after every election there must be electoral violence, and it is exceedingly polarizing, as highlighted by Honorable Yakubu Dogara and the questions that he received. So what lessons have we learned from the First Republic? And the greatest problems, of course, have been highlighted for everywhere, but as we seek a homegrown new system of government, and we try to x-ray all the other systems of government that Nigeria has, what lessons do you think we should have taken on board as potholes, and how do we navigate so that we don't make those new mistakes as we try to have these new conversations? I yield.
Thank you so much, moderator. I think I will start with where the former governor stopped when he talked about us not pretending. You know, there's nothing like, quite frankly, with all due respect, homegrown, really. You know, we have to borrow from all political systems. Have had to borrow from each other, one way or the other. So when you talk about our own attempt now to rethink our political system, if we are talking of standing on the premise of homegrown, then perhaps we'll be talking of our traditional system, starting from there, because that's really the system we are used to, as it were, starting from way back. But quite seriously, Nigeria, we all know the story. We were colonized, and by 1914, we were put together. And then by 1946, you know, when the Richard's Constitution was passed, we began this whole idea of representation. That's when actually Nigerians were mainstreamed into the whole system of governance that we all now have. But by 1952, under the Mark-Faxon Constitution, the idea of parliamentary system was fully vetted in the Constitution. And we practiced that up until 1966, when the military struck. Since then, you know, of course, for 13 years, we didn't have a democratic system in place. Then, in 1976, you know, the Constituent Assembly, after the draft of the Constitution, and the suggestion about adopting the presidential system. Now, there's need for us to understand how did we come about the presidential system. In 1975, there was a coup, if you remember. Mojola, you know, constituted the 50, later 49 member drafting committee. And he actually, and this is really, if you go back to history, he didn't mention presidentialism as such. All he wanted was for us to have a clear, you know, have clarity as to who is in charge at every single point. Because after the election of 1964, there was conflict, and we didn't know really who was in charge. And so the military wanted to be sure who is in charge at all times. You know, and that was the premise upon which the talk about presidentialism began. And of course, the drafting committee suggested that we should have a presidential system. But my concern really is the fact that we don't really have much, historical ties with the Americans. And so adopting the presidential system, as we have come to realize, seems to have come from virtually nowhere compared to the parliamentary system which we encountered with the British. So since 1979, we have to concede it, we have been struggling to really understand what the presidential system is all about. And I'm happy that Right Honorable Dogara has said that we have created what scholars have warned repeatedly against, which is hybridism. We've pick and choose what we consider to be good enough for us as far as the presidential system is concerned. If we're adopting it, then we should have gone all the way. But fortunately, we did some picking and choosing, and here we are. So for me, from the reviews that we've done, it seemed to me, that perhaps we should, now that we have started it, begin now to ask ourselves again, what is really our contact with the Americans and all their historical experiences? And what have we done with our own? What have we put in our constitution about those systems? The review I see there is that we really made a mess of even adopting the American system. And then we have not taken full cognizance of our own democratic system as we experienced it under the British. And so we really need to do a lot of thinking again. Do we go the path of, the traditionalists? Of course, that will be, how many we have over 500 traditional, ethnic communities. So which one do we adopt?
Okay.
So, but since everybody seems to constantly refer to the cost of governance, and this is where I will narrow my talk, because there will be no time to talk about many things. Since everybody talks about the cost of governance, for me, the main attraction of the parliamentary system, really, is the fact that, as reported by scholars who have done studies on this, Professor McMahon and his colleague, Professor Kodzan, they've come to the conclusion that, from the reviews they've done, and this is empirical, that the parliamentary system holds better opportunity for economic growth because of the system that is embedded in it.
Okay.
First, the issue of accountability. Of course, that in the parliamentary system, the prime minister is accountable, not only to his own party, but even to the entire parliament. You know what has happened with the British. You talk about polarizing. You can't run away from conflict in politics. After all, what is the meaning of politics? Politics is about conflict and resolution. So nobody should be scared of the conflict, quote unquote, that seem to be persistent in politics. But the parliamentary system is acclaimed for the system of accountability that it puts in place. And then there is the system of transparency, which is that the prime minister must constantly come to defend the policy of government. We can actually have an imperial president, under the presidential system, which is that he can sit back in the government house without interacting with anybody, and there's really nothing anybody can do about it. Compared with the parliamentary system, where the prime minister will have to constantly come before parliament to justify, government policy. So, for me, if you were going to go by the empirical study, the economics of governance system alone, makes the parliamentary system very attractive, and I think that we can begin our conversation also from that part.
Okay. Thank you very much for your very insightful response. But let me quickly say, and of course, this is drawing inference from the people who have spoken before me, and again, the keynote speaker, where he says, and I'm inclined to agree with him, that borrowing from systems of government, the Greeks and the Romans and so on and so forth, where democracy was birthed, as it were, the entire world has borrowed from it. So I think that borrowing, and you know, like Honorable Dogara said, borrowing wasn't the problem. It was cherry picking, and what it was that we chose to pick, and we picked those things without the ability to constantly amend, without the constant amendments that ensured that the institutions of democracy were protected from overreaching activists within the democratic space. So I just thought I should make that point really quickly. And of course, I left the last for best, or the best for last. As I said, you sit down here, Nigeria is a country that has, oh, my apologies, I'm so sorry, real apologies. I was blown away by her youth. Yes. I want to find out. I mean, the most amazing thing about this dialogue is that it is an all of society, all of intergenerational conversation. And this is not something that you see often in Nigeria. It's normally a group of older folk who sit in a room and take decisions. Now, over 70% of our population is below the age of 40, which means that a staggering 145 million Nigerians make up the youth. If you were a country on your own, you'd be the 10th most populous country in the world. So that's very interesting. And I just want to hear what your views are. What kind of Nigeria do you want to see? And where have we dropped the ball? And you have 3 minutes to say that.
That's a very tough assignment, ma'am. But I'll try my best. Good afternoon, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I really want to thank and appreciate the organizers for, intentionally bringing the youth voice into the conversation. And the fact remains that if we're going to build a Nigeria that works for all, we have to really pay attention to intergenerational collaboration and really co-leadership. I'll start by saying that I believe young people, as well as all Nigerians, really want a system that is reflective of our cultures, of our diversity, of our aspirations and desires as a people. And of course, that then means we want a homegrown system of governance. What exactly that will entail in terms of the nitty-gritty is something that really must be discussed, and that's why fora like this is very important so that we can have all of society, like you said, weigh in and chime in on the conversation. So this being said, one of the key components of the legislative agenda that's currently guiding Parliament is really around citizens' engagement. And for us as young people, that means we want to continue to be at the table, to have these conversations and share our voices. I am just one person, and even though I'm here speaking, for young people, like you said, there are 145 million other young people, and we need to ensure that we have more young people being part of this discourse. Secondly, I would like to say that in terms of what we want as young people, is not entirely the system itself, but we want a Nigeria where we trust our leaders. And if I should take the point that the former speaker, Right Honorable Dogara, said, he said that when he was, 2 people reached out to him yesterday to say, share their concerns around, this event. And that just demonstrates the large trust deficits that we have in our society today. And I will say that it's even more on the youth side of things. Because even when government comes out with the very best of policies, it's usually met with skepticism. And that's a fundamental issue that we must correct for anything else we're doing to actually stand and thrive. I would also say that in terms of now developing this homegrown system, that we should, in fact, involve our African culture, our Nigerian cultures, and we have to go back to our roots. I'm not saying we have to bring in all the traditional leaders, so to say, but we really need to go back to the basics. We really need to go back to our history. We really need to see what worked for us before the Brits came, and how can we take some of those models and make it into something that works for us. And finally, I would say that we're in a time where we really need to think outside the box. in terms of addressing the current challenges that face us as a nation. And one thing I remember as an undergrad student in law of contract class was I couldn't really understand how, when you talk of a contract, there are a few elements. There's offer, there's acceptance, there's consideration. And once you have these three things come together, you have a binding contract that anybody can sue if there's a breach. And I remember asking my professor in the class, and I said, why doesn't that apply to the social contract? Why doesn't that happen in terms of our political landscape? So maybe there's also a legal response in terms of how do we, build the sort of nation that we want. Do we want to enforce campaign promises? Do we want to, look at issues like that? So these are also things that would form part of this parliamentary system that we want to do. And let me say finally, because again, there are concerns around the parliamentary system. There are good sides to it, but there are some parts that scare people. One of which is losing the minority voice. In the executive system, or the presidential system, if I should say, one of the things that was introduced in the 1979 Constitution to address or protect minorities was that provision that says that a quarter, to win the presidential election, you must have a quarter in 2/3 of all the states to ensure that there's a spread. So when we come into the parliamentary system, we also need to think about how do we ensure that the minorities are protected within that system. So let's create something new, and let's create something that works for all Nigerians. Thank you.
All right. Yes, thank you so very much. And her response just highlights the absolute need for us to have an all-of-society conversation. But let me also say, and I listened to you and you were talking about, history, and I recall that a large percentage of Nigerian youth went through school without history being taught in schools. And so, it's also very pathetic, because as far as I'm concerned, if you want to move to where it is we desire to be with a homegrown, with our history, as you put it, we have a whole generation of who are going to be beneficiaries who don't even know what our history is as of government policy. So I just want you to hold that thought, and I'm going to come back to you with it. Honorable Kingsley Chinda, my apologies again for overlooking you. Now, there is a popular saying that an institution is but a lengthened shadow of a man. There is an interplay between character versus institutional structure. As one of the authors of the bill, you are proposing a homegrown parliamentary system as a silver bullet and a panacea to all of our democratic problems. There's a school of thought that says the greatest problem that Nigeria has is the leadership selection process and not the structure under which it runs. We also say that it is the political structure or the political way in which socialization, should I say, of the Nigerians. Now, Honorable Chinda, and she's thrown up a lot of skepticism. A lot of people from the gallery and from the audience have thrown up a lot of skepticism about the parliamentary system of government being the panacea. So I'm just going to give you 3 minutes to convince all of us of this lofty idea and tell us exactly why you believe that it is the silver bullet that cures all of our needs, including everything that has been highlighted on this panel.
Thank you. I think that restates the cliche by Alexander Pope, referred to by His Excellency, that for forms of government, let fools contend, whatever is best administered. But I think that not just those who administer the system, you must also have a system that is administrable in your own circumstance. And that's why today, if you ask, some persons might even say that Nigerians are inherently corrupt. But that is not the case. When we started, we were not like this. So you ask the question, where did we get it wrong? And the only thing that we have seen is that the system we imported, the laws we have so much loophole, and it makes it comfortable for us, public office holders, to do things that we get away with easily. The former speaker talked about the issues of impeachment. Removing a councillor under our present law. It's almost an impossibility. And so the councillor knows, I'm not talking about members of National Assembly, I'm not talking about the executive, the councillor at the ward level, because you have to get majority signatures of voters, and that will be confirmed by INEC. How do you do that? When even the voters register has more than 50% ghost names. So where are you going to get the 50% genuine persons and their signatures confirmed? So this system has inherent loopholes that will allow those who are administering it to go scot-free, and we need to tighten it. Another reason why we say so is the same Nigerian who takes pride in beating the traffic light, who takes pride in even the NEPA at home, you want to do a bypass. Send that same person to Ghana. I'm not talking about the United States. Send him to Ghana, and there is a queue somewhere. He will line up quietly because he knows that the system is not the same thing with what he has at home. So some people talk about mindset change. Yes, you might think about mindset change, but to me, the person sitting behind, the children behind, are the people that require the mindset change, because we already know that what we are doing is wrong. And when we go to a clime where they have better and stronger systems, we behave ourselves. So what mind are you going to change? We need to change the system. We need to begin to provide stronger penalty for those who commit crimes. I remember once, either in the 8th or 7th Assembly, we proposed a bill for death penalty for public office holders that steal public fund. It did not see the light of day. I think that we should begin to take extreme measures that will discourage public office holders from doing the things that they do. And the current presidential system that we practice is one that allows a lot of leverage. There are so many things that are morally wrong, but legally they are right under our laws. And so it becomes difficult to hold anybody culpable, even where people criticize over such actions. And for us to move on, we must begin to look at our own peculiar attitude and couch laws that will take care of them. That is the homegrown. Homegrown is not that we look at our culture, tradition, and all that alone. No, what are Nigerians likely to do if you give them this opportunity? Let me use discretion. If you bring a public office holder in Europe and bring a Nigerian public office holder and ask them to exercise discretion on an issue, I'm sure that you will agree that the Nigerian public office holder will be looking at religion. He will be looking at tribe whilst taking that decision. But the public office holder outside here, religion, tribe, state, and all that might not matter. And so if we are bringing laws that has to do with exercise of discretion, we must consider these facts, that our people are likely to be swayed by these facts. And then such laws that apply outside here might not apply effectively in Nigeria. So for us, a homegrown system is one that will look at the problems we have, issues of corruption, issues of accountability, issues of transparency, issues of character in office, and couch the laws to take care of them. I don't believe in death penalty, but if death penalty will solve our problems, we'll go ahead and include death penalty for public office holders when you misbehave. We believe that it will deter our people. And for the group that has come up with this idea, we are throwing it open to Nigerians. We are calling on everybody, and that's why you have the younger ones here, that the time has come for us to sit up and begin to change our system, not just the mindset. If we have a system in place, Nigerians will change. And if you recall, the last administration, Buhari, when he came in, President Buhari came in, people were talking about body language or body movement. Everybody sat up, and we expected that things would begin to change. Until the administration went in for 6 months, they were still booting, yet to commence. Nigerians relaxed, things relapsed, and even got worse. So for every administration that comes, you look at the enforcement mechanism, you look at the body language and the character, and then people react in line with that. But we are praying that, look, in the interest of our country, we must look at our peculiar attitude of Nigerians and begin to bring administration, governments, and laws that will suit our peculiar circumstance and condition. The current constitution we have will not help us. Amendment in bits might not also be the solution. There is need for a holistic change. And that change is to look at our condition, our circumstance, and commence with a homegrown system of government.
All right. Thank you very much, Honorable Chinda, for attempting to navigate through this exceedingly difficult maze. And now, of course, for want of time, normally the panel discussions would have a Q&A, but everybody, you know, that's what happens when you have such a rich panel and everybody just has so much to share. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do the Q&As immediately, but we're going to break off for the next panel, and then we'll get everybody back onto the stage, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So I'd like to thank you very, very much indeed for the participation. I mean, the clapping and the expressions on everybody's face showed that everybody was listening intently. And my takeaway as well is that, yes, indeed, there is a consensus around the room that our system of democracy has failed. It hasn't yielded to the dividends of democracy, as Nigerians say, and there's absolute need for us to start to have conversations about the way out of this conundrum. So thank you very much, and I must thank everybody for your contributions. And please, may I crave your indulgence and ask that you stay back after the second panel so that we can actually take questions from the audience. On that note, I'd like to thank you very much, and we may please be excused from this panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, let's have a group photograph for this panel. We wouldn't want to bore the chairman of a dialogue. Would have actually asked him to join them, but please kindly just bear with us. We'll take this, the group photograph for this panel, and then we are constituting the second panel very quickly. But just before we move on to constituting the second panel, it will be proper, because we've kept him waiting for a pretty long time, Pa Ayo Adebanjo, who is the co-chair for this national discuss. And so we'd like to thank the panelists and, of course, the moderator. Please give them another round of applause. Can we just spare a few minutes, 3, maximum 5, for Pa Ayo Adebanjo to quickly give us his thoughts as the co-chair of his national dialogue. Pa Ayo Adebanjo, the leader of Afenifere, we're waiting for you. Welcome, sir.
Sound. Sound. Can you do audio? No audio. Can you hear him? Is there no audio? All right, whilst we wait for Ayo Adebanjo's audio to come on, we'll be inviting very quickly those of them. All right. Mr. Chairman, please permit me to quickly invite to take their seats on the side of the divide members of the second panel. Dr. Sam Amadi is the former chairman, Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. Dr. Baba Aliyu is an Islamic scholar and an imam from Kano. Dr. Baba Aliyu. Please, a round of applause for him as well as he makes his way here. I'd also like to invite His Eminence, John Cardinal Onaekon, to please also join us on this side of the divide. Representative Wale Raji. Dr. Bashir Aliyu. Honorable Wale Raji. Yes, is making his way here. You can take the one seat here and the other two. Yes, sir. Next, yes, and we'll leave the seats. No, that's for the We're actually waiting to invite over the next panelists, Senator Florence Itagiwa. She'll be joining us shortly. But then our moderator for this session is a very experienced person as well. Laolu Akonde is a former senior special assistant to the President, Office of the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshimbajo, and presently is the host of Inside Sources on television and a journalist of very great repute. Please let's welcome him as well. He'll be sitting in the middle. And then when Senator Itagiwa gets back, we'll be inviting her over to this end. And moderator, sir, you have 40 minutes in the first instance, but extended to 45. And my time pace is 5 minutes on one, if I'm correct. And so your time starts now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we just get right into it. So this panel will be looking more at the issues of how to get this done. And we're going to start with Cardinal John Onaekon. And I wanted you to take an approach, and basically what we try to do is to have very short answers, 2-3 minutes, so that we can possibly have 2 rounds. You know, I want to allot 6 minutes to each of the speakers altogether, but we could split that into 2 questions. So if you keep your answers into 2 or 3 minutes, we can go for a second round. So to start with Cardinal John Onaekon. Now, if you look at what seems to be a consensus around the fact that the presidential system has not actually delivered the democratic dividend for our people, how best do you think we can get a national consensus out of this room, especially coming from the non-political elite? Because part of the challenges that I imagine we have is that we have left politics too much in the hands of politicians. Politicians have a job to win an election, okay? But we cannot run society in a progressive way if that is all we do. So how do we engage the non-political actors, the voices outside of the political terrain? You know, leaders like yourself in the religious sector, people in business, people in the academia, public intellectuals, to begin to raise this important issue that, look, this presidential system is not delivering the dividend. If you agree with that, Cardinal.
Thank you very much. I have been listening with keen interest to not only this conversation around the previous panel, but also all the other contributions that have been made, starting with the opening speech of the chairman of this occasion. And I seem to hear a general consensus. The only consensus I can get is this, that what we have on ground is just not good enough for us. That what we have on ground is not just good enough for us, and that we cannot continue to simply accept it as such, as if that is the best that we can get. Because my problem, or the problem of many of us, is that when things are not going well, those who are in authority tell us that that is the best we can get, or that they cannot be better. We must recognize that governance is difficult. We are out there, we don't understand what they are facing. But from this consensus, we are realizing that we are not getting the best. The emphasis seems to be on the legislature during this discussion so far. And that is why the debate is on what kind of parliament do we want? Do we want a parliamentary system or a presidential system? But it's still focusing on parliament. But I would rather wish we should also expand the discussion to all the three arms of the government, namely the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. And whatever we say of the legislature should be also applicable to the other two branches of government. And if all are not taken together, you cannot move forward simply by juggling around with what kind of parliament we will have. So I'm not too much worried what kind of parliament. I'm rather worried what kind of government we have. And I believe that it is already said by the previous panel, the main purpose of government is the good of the people, and their safety, their security, and their prosperity. If that is not there, all arms of government must take responsibility for it. The question this gathering should be asking, how do we move away from where we are now? There must be some reason why we are not moving beyond where we are now. As a religious leader, I look at what is happening, and I am more interested not so much in the structures, what kind of structures we have in government. I'm more interested now in the people who are running government, and what is it that is moving them when they do things. And so I will want us to distinguish between the structures and the spirit. To some extent, you can say it doesn't matter what kind of structure you have, because there are many kinds of democracies. Incidentally, there are many types of government, not only democracy. We seem to think that the only type of government you need is a democracy. But there are governments that are not democratic and that are performing well. So we may want to extend our discussion in that direction. I'm not sure if we have the courage to do so. But generally, it is said today that the best form of government is democracy. And we have opted for that. So if we have opted for that, we must do it well. And that is where me and our sheikh there comes in. I ask myself, because every now and again, religion keeps coming up in the discussion. What has been the role of religious leaders in this whole picture? Or to put it differently, if our system is running badly, what is the position of religious communities and leaders in this mess in which we are? Have we been part of the problem, or have we been part of the solution? Obviously, I will hope we will be part of the solution, because that is what I believe religion should be. And I have you told us to be brief, and I feel that it is part of the job of, since a country like Nigeria, we are very religious, that fact itself should not be a liability, rather it should be an asset. That for religion to be an asset in Nigeria, the fact that we are the most religious nation in the world, we should also be the most honest group of people in the world. We should be a place where solidarity and taking of one another is much felt, and the religious leaders should be seen to be promoting this among those who happen to hold power, which means we must go to the root of the core messages of our religions, various religions. And very importantly, given that we have a nation with many religions, we have to seriously and proactively discover our common grounds, especially to those common grounds which will help our nation to live well in peace, in unity, and in harmony. And I believe it is possible. I've been making effort in that direction, and I would not say my effort has been in vain. In fact, I believe it is an effort worth making. I'll be very happy to hear what my colleague from the Islamic angle will say. At the end of the day, we also must start doing our examination of conscience. When we look at how much religion is around, I often speak about holy noises all over the place. And then we reach at the real world of a nation where we don't trust anybody anymore. Then I think we need to ask ourselves serious questions. Starting from ourselves, we who claim to be religious, even though it is a problem now to even know who is a religious leader and who is not, because it takes different forms. We have to take that into consideration too. Thank you very much, Laulu.
Thank you, Cardinal, for your extensive opening remarks, and you have quite a lot of issues that you have raised. We'll try to see how much of it we can unpack. I want to take it, and we're going to come back to the Chief Imam also, but I want to take it to Dr. Amadi to try to articulate the issue of how much of an expectation ought we to have for politicians to transform a system from which they are currently benefiting. So because this idea of a parliamentary system, I agree with what Honorable Chinda said. The problems with Nigeria is not that we don't know the right thing. So it's not a problem of mindset. It's a problem of what the structure allows. And so if politicians are, good and dandy with what we have, why should we expect them to be the ones to lead the change? Which goes to my point that, look, what do the people who are outside of the political terrain structure, what are they supposed to be doing? Dr. Amadi.
Thank you very much. I think I will start by saying that the assumption here is that our failure is because of the institution itself. That's, we have framed this debate to sort of libel presidentialism, saying that it failed, not that the practice of it failed. So there are I'll start with three realisms. First is that institutions matter, and Chinda is correct. Structure matters. Again, institutions matter not in the ideal form, but in their real form, how you practice them. There's a difference between an institution defined and institution in practice. So even though scholars say that presidentialism clearly less costly, in terms of empirics, greater GDP growth has people who operate parliamentary system have greater GDP growth than presidential system. But again, if you look across the world, you see that we have hybridization. So Israel, South Africa, they are parliamentary presidential. So we should bear that in mind. There are few totally ideal parliamentary and presidential system. Maybe the US and the UK. France is a mixture. Germany is a mixture. So we shouldn't run away with the idealism that presidential system, parliamentary has failed. Now, back to the point you raised, which is very important. Now, how do we choose systems? Power is at the heart of institutional change or not, meaning that those who benefit by an institution will have less incentive to change those institutions. But power is not uniform. That means, like I think the keynote speaker made a very important point. There are dimensions of power. And the new thinking is what they call end of power. People like Moses Naim, okay? What does that mean is that power is no longer hierarchical. We don't talk in terms of government, we talk about governance. We talk about network, we talk about influence. So this kind of conversation can create narratives, number one, that are powerful. Can also create narratives that show win-win. So politicians who probably are wedded to presidentialism and the power it gives will see that parliamentary system actually does not hurt them as much as they think. So there's this idea of why should we change a system if we are beneficial? But if you show that this system actually is not benefiting you as much as you think, you shift the investment of resources and time to protecting that system to allowing change. But ultimately, I think that is what I call social virality, meaning that changes come when it gets to maybe epidemic level. Social change trends gets to a point of tipping point where the conversation becomes very hot, empowering, constraining, and threatening to people in power. Will this conversation get to a point where the National Assembly members, the presidents, everybody involved will think a second time and say, okay, why don't we transition to a different kind of system, even if it's not wholly presidential? What will determine it is whether the promoters of this system are able to embed it in social realism. The people see it as their project. It becomes part of town hall conversation. The religious leaders who are powerful sign on. Social actors who are leaders sign on. So in a sense, it becomes organic. And if you look at the U.S. constitutional change, I heard a lot about the U.S. Constitution. If you look at the history of U.S. Constitution, the difference is that U.S. Constitution was states ceding power to federal. Our question is federal creating states. And so that's why the U.S. presidential system has inbuilt structural control, because it wasn't a case of federal government legislating, power, giving power to states. It was the states that evolved and gave power. And that's what the Constitution says, powers not enumerated are reserved for the people. And so if you flip, and I think the professor from University of Benin said that point, but the difference here is that the US system also was organic. It evolved over a struggle, period of time. And that gets to the issue of adaptation. You can adapt systems. Yes, we need to adapt. But the key thing about choice of models to choose is what's overriding state-society model. The Nigerian state was a feudal, neo-feudal state. And it created the constitution in a manner that preserved those unaccountable centers of power, because the Nigerian elites really never wanted to democratize. So we take democracy as a structure, but the organizing principle of egalitarianism, of openness, of accountability is absent in our social cultural framing. And so it leads to how we choose what model, what we choose from the constitutional framework. So I think that the conversation is, look, are we ready to now move ahead and say, we want to transition to a democratic, accountable system? And this is where civil society comes in. The moment we have that civic movement that creates an urgency to make that shift, the political leaders themselves begin to weigh the cost-benefit analysis of resisting. And so it's not a matter of exhortation, begging people in power. It's a matter of social realism that, look, we can't sustain that political autonomy, the hegemony, and we have to concede to a demand for transition. I think that's how it works.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that you laid the issues very clearly, and so I want to take it now further to Senator Florence Itagiwa to give us. So you have been around for quite a while in the political scene and outside of the political scene also, and you've been a senator. What is your take on the usefulness of an homegrown parliamentary system, and what do you think is the role, or how can people outside of the political structures, agitate for this?
Thank you very much. I think I must commend the organizers of this conversation. I commend you for being able to bring iconic past leaders together, and of course the next generation, the children, our children who are here with us, to have this conversation. I'm very, very proud of you, all my colleagues that organized this. Before I delve into your question, I think I'm going to be answering your question as a minority. Minority in all its ramifications. Minority in gender, minority in the state I come from, minority in the local government that I'm said to come from, and the minority in my ward. It has come to a point where I'm speaking openly now, I'm speaking as like a minority. So it has come to a stage where I'm very, very skeptical about any form of government, because I don't know what would work for Nigeria. In my opinion, the only advantage that homegrown parliamentary system would have for us as the people is that it allows for accountability. That is, if our homegrown addresses it the way it should be addressed. But my problem is that we have issues, you understand? There are things that we must look at and address in Nigeria, so that those kids there would have an opportunity. There was a time in Nigeria where every human being, had an opportunity, if you so desire. There was a time that if you want to go out there and serve your people, you didn't need to have a godfather or a leader, anything like that. There was a time that you could aspire anywhere to be what you want to be. I, as a woman, I contested 4 elections. I contested election on the platform of opposition. I contested election when the entire south of Nigeria was PDP. And I went and said, okay, I'm not going to, because you had to belong to that government, because it was called government party. And I said, I'm not going to belong there. So I went opposition and, contested election on the platform of a party that was supposed to belong to the North. And yet I won that election. I contested election to House of Rep at the time that you had to be UNCP because it was supposed to be a Abacha's party. I contested on the platform of DPN, which was not an Abacha's party or government party, and I won the election. So that's, how good and transparent, even in under military dispensation, the system was. So before you start addressing what form of government or no form of government, you have to address the issue of restoring the dignity of the electoral system. You have to restore the dignity of the judiciary, because that way those children there would have a future. You have to have a system where the minorities' presence, is recognized. You have to establish a system where you will not be trampled upon because you don't come from this or you don't know that. Look at the instance that, till today, I say it unashamedly, that I'm a refugee in my country because Nigeria ceded Bakassi, without any question, without any reference to the National Assembly, accepted a judgment, ceded my territory. Until today, the same Nigeria that ceded my territory has not considered or deemed it fit, at least to rehabilitate me and resettle me in my country. So they will let me a refugee in my country. So once this sort of system would, recognize this, my only fear, perhaps this homegrown parliamentary system, if it is done properly, not the Nigerian homegrown, because I'm not ashamed to be speaking like this in front of my children, but I have to say the truth. So if it is properly homegrown, to be all-inclusive, so that every, the advantage, if we had practiced this system that we adopted, the way it's supposed to be practiced, then every Nigerian would have sense of belonging. If you organize, if it's a federal system, and you recognize the federating units, and reduce power from the federal and go down to the federating units, then everybody would have sense of belonging. So if a homegrown system is going to do that, because it does have a disadvantage, or disadvantages. I remember that when I was growing up, I didn't know much, but my mother was a journalist, so I used to hear a lot from her. But I don't know that vividly, I recall that I think there was a parliamentary system. There was North, there was South, there was West, and there was the Eastern region. But then there was no mention of the minority states inside the Eastern region. You understand? No, there
was no South.
The Eastern region. There was Eastern region, there was no South. You understand? So, till today, people erroneously call, if you are from East, you have Igbo. Because they don't know that inside that is, you understand, there are the rivers, that the Calabar, that the Ibibios, that nobody, I grew up hearing people say, oh, where are you from? I'm from the East, you're Igbo. And I have to be careful, because that also allowed for the division of this country. That started that war that brought us to this level. So I could go on forever. But I do thank you for this opportunity. These are my thoughts. I do have more of my thoughts written down, and I hand over to the organizers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator, for that very enriching contribution. So we take it to Dr. Aliyu, and then we want to get another bite on the role of the religious leaders and leaders outside of the political terrain, such as yourself. First of all, maybe you should tell us actually if you think that this idea of a homegrown parliamentary system does offer, in your view, any credit or merit to it. And if you think so, how do you think we can turn this thing to some kind of a national movement?
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. First, I would like to align my thoughts with what Cardinal Oyenkan has said. It is not about systems, it's about the people. Because we know that all prophets of God, their legacy is that they trained people and they left people who built institutions. Our problem is a problem of governance. Politics is essentially supposed to be for governance. We were taught by the Prophet Muhammad that the prophets of the children of Israel, they were governing their people. The word that was used is politics, siyasa. They were doing siyasa, that is, they were governing people. But now politics in our context has been taken away completely from governance. The Economist magazine, London-based Economist magazine of 2015, just before the 2015 elections, they made an observation that they wrote an article on Nigeria, and they made an observation that unless the structure of Nigeria is seriously corrected to make the industry and the economy of the country to be more promising in taking care of the needs of people, people are always going to turn politics into an industry. And this is what has happened. Politics has become an industry, and the easiest way to amass wealth, not for the sake of governance, but so that you will perpetuate yourself in power. And that is why you need this enormous wealth that is so incomprehensible that people are amassing in the names of politics. Because you need that for vote buying, because the institutions have been bastardized. The institution of the electoral process is no longer there to operate. It is operating in order to bring the strong person to power. The judiciary is the same, because otherwise it is inconceivable that you will have people expressing their opinion, millions to vote a person, and yet in the end, the one who is going to decide who comes to power will be a panel of 3, 5, or 7 judges. And it will go like that. So we need to build people that are upright. The question of accountability, as observed by Right Honorable, is very, very important. And from our own perspective, as religious leaders, for accountability, you need 2 things. You need morality, and you need the rule of law. You need morality because ultimately you are dealing with individuals. Unless individuals, they feel that they are accountable before God and that they are going to be answerable for their actions, things are not going to change. And you also need the rule of law, because what is not censured by morality, it is censured by the strength of law. there was an observation made by President Obama, a very right observation in his first visit to Ghana. He said Africa needs to create strong institutions, not strong individuals. But all our effort now is to create strong individuals, people who will be invincible, who will be above the law. Otherwise, just make an observation, what you have in Abuja here. In Abuja, whenever there is a traffic jam, you find that it is the worst place for you to be in Nigeria. And you have people that are very aware, people very educated, because everyone feels that he's above the law. The breakdown of the rule of law is more apparent in Abuja than anywhere else. I witnessed an occasion during the Hajj whereby we had in the tent where the federal officials were. I was part of the federal government delegation at that time. And then there were tents that have been allocated to people according to their positions and according to their payments and so on and so forth. But then members came from the Nigerian delegation that they had not made provisions for them. And they said nobody has got any right over them to say that they have to stay in this place or in that place. And while you are in a state of ihram, in the state of the shrouds for making pilgrimage, even argument will invalidate your Hajj. And yet people were ready to fight at that time. And these were the people who were the lawmakers, who were the governors. They were fighting among themselves. So this question, this issue is not all about the systems. It's about us as a people. And we need to come up and remember that we are first accountable to God before everyone else. I will complete my statement with a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, cases, you report cases to me and I adjudicate between you. And it may be one of you is more eloquent in presenting his position than the other. And I will rule for him based on what the outward of what I heard from him. Let me warn him that anyone who I give a right to him that is not in reality his right, I am only giving him a portion of hellfire. So it means that if we are ready, we know that we failed an election and we are not ready to accept the outcome of the election, and we'll go by hook or by crook and buy that chair and stay for 4 years, we are swimming in the pool of hellfire. If we are not able to check ourselves to do that, how can we change our system? We need people with integrity. Integrity, this is one beautiful thing that I found about English language, which I used to think is the prerogative of the Arabic language. The Arabic language, every word that you see, it has a philosophical meaning underneath it. For instance, intellect is called something that prevents you from doing what is not right. It's called nuhia, the one that forbids you, or it is called a barrier. Any word in Arabic, you will find that it has got that philosophical undertones. In English, the word integrity has got that. Integrity is from the word integer. And integer, as we know, is a whole number. The opposite is fraction. So we need that wholeness, people that are whole, people that are ready to sacrifice their worldly gains for standing up to their principles, that they are whole people, that instead of actually demeaning themselves, they remember the oaths they took. And in this respect, which is the final thing that I'm going to say, God has warned the believers. He said, do not sell your oaths and vows for a paltry price. What is with God is better for you if only but you know. What you have will finish, but what is with God is permanent. This, how many do we have that are ready to sacrifice the immediate gains in order to stand up to their principles? So unless we have, what we need are role models. Because whatever system we have, if we have role models that are ready to make the system work, the system will work. So it's not really, as far as I align my thoughts with the Cardinal, it's not really the system, but it's the people operating the system. Thank you.
All right, it's a good point to revert to Representative Wale Raji, and I hope that in your response, you'll be able to articulate the viewpoint that a parliamentary system offers us the opportunity to compel, and you take it your way, to compel the kind of dividend that we require at the state that we have. We've had voices on this panel that says that, look, it's not so much about the system itself. There are quite a lot of things going on. We need people of integrity. We are religious people. Have we even, lived up to that billing? So there are quite a lot of issues around, why we are where we are. Now, your bill, like those of your colleagues, is saying that, look, one important problem is the presidential system. So how can you convince the people that this homegrown parliamentary system can actually be a turning point in our democratic evolution in such a way that the people can begin to get some real benefits from democracy?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Well, I think from the beginning of this discussion, we have highlighted the flaws inherent in the present system of government. And we started with parliamentary system of government. We experienced it for a period, and we all know the benefit, the progress we were able to make within the period. For no fault of ours, the military imposed the presidential system of government we are practicing. And the primary purpose of government is the welfare and security of lives and property of the people. The question is, has the present system, delivered on this purpose? It's been highlighted earlier that rather than getting better, corruption has deepened. The cost of governance that the professor referred to as economy of government, as the system has created a situation that it has become so expensive. Accountability is another issue. Now, like we said, that it has been highlighted, we, under the parliamentary system of government, nobody is in government without being elected by the people. So you cannot become a minister that does not have a constituency under the parliamentary. So accountability is guaranteed. And unlike a situation where somebody can emerge as a minister without contesting election, and his allegiance is to the appointing authority. He may not even know where his constituency starts and where it ends. For as long as the appointing authority is happy with him, he keeps his job. In actual fact, from our experience in Parliament, is a system that a minister can even shun the invitation of the House. We have seen it happen in the House. So, but under the parliamentary system of government, you have, the leader, apart from the cost of reducing the cost of electing our leader, the leader is being a member of parliament is also accountable. There is the question time, on a weekly basis, that the leader of government, the prime minister, is held accountable, is made to account. Questions are asked, and it also allows for robust opposition, because you have, for every ministerial position, you have a shadow cabinet, that will be monitoring. In fact, you have an alternative government in waiting under the under the parliamentary system of government. So it's allowed, overall, in terms of accountability, in terms of the cost of governance, and in terms of participatory democracy, because it allows the ruling party to govern, and it allows the minority to also have a say through the activities of the shadow cabinet ministers. So I think that, we have seen what happened in the past, we have what we are experiencing, and the way forward is, if we embark on the journey and we discover that, look, we are not arriving at our destination, I think it's a time for us to review our situation. But I must say this, that moving forward, to avoid the mistakes of the past, I think it should involve all of us. We, as parliamentarians, we have set the platform, for national debate on this, on this. And I think that it will be a good thing that we Nigerians now take it over as a national project, so that flaws of the past, we do not repeat. Before I round up, I also think that above all, we also need transition as a people. We also need to look at ourselves, because we can make a bad system, a good system, to be bad through our conduct. Because when our religious leaders here were talking, I asked the question, who is a religious leader in Nigeria today? Because look, by the system we are practicing today, somebody can wake up tomorrow and say that he received the call and establish a religious house, and you see all sorts. And such people are invited to accorded the privileges and honor that the religious leaders, enjoy. So I think this, and in coming up with the homegrown democratic system that we are advocating for, we should also be unmindful. We should not be unmindful of our culture. Because when you talk of corruption, are Nigerians really corrupt? By nature, I grew up in a system that to be seen or addressed as a criminal is an abomination. I was a student at the University of Lagos in the 70s. The vendor then would distribute newspapers all over and put bowls by the side. People will go there, buy, and drop the money. And no dime will miss. When we were growing up, farmers would put their products by the roadside. People passing by who are interested, they will look at something and value it and place the value by the side. And the money, nobody passing by will see such money and take it. But what happened? Today, the society will celebrate criminality. Who are those occupying the front row in our churches and our mosque? So I think we also in finding a new system that works for us, we should also be mindful of ourselves. We should also a transformation. I think what we are doing now is we are embarking on of self-discovery as a nation, and I pray that we get there. Thank you very much.
All right, we have 5 minutes more. I'm going to give Dr. Amadi 2 minutes because he spent certainly less than 6 minutes. So I want to give you 2 minutes, Dr. Amadi, to make a pitch. In your own view, what is the most compelling argument, for a parliamentary system? If you believe in it, what's your strongest point?
I think the most compelling argument about parliamentary system is that it's more suited for poorer societies because of its approximation to consensus building. So you have a parliamentary system where power is shared, representation normally based on not winner takes all. So there's a shared power, which is very important. Secondly, is that the engagement between the president, the prime minister, and the elected representatives is more like conventionally conditioned for response. So the president sits there, doesn't sit in villa and sign check. He goes there, engage with them. That discourse creates a sense of responsibility. Again, parliamentary system of government, if you model it with level of regionalism, could be less expensive to run. So you don't have to do general elections for the president and spend money. Elected parliamentarians can elect their prime minister. It becomes a leader of the house, of the party, and becomes. So it's saving. Again, but the danger is, if you look at Israel, which is a parliamentary system, it's a very chaotic politics. Several governments is changed over time. And let's bear in mind, when we moved to presidential system of 1979, if you read Professor Nwabueze, the argument for it was developmental. The presidential system provides a chief executive who can drive development. And I think we are at a stage where our concern should be developmental. I would want a fusion of that presidential system where the president is a chief executive, can drive development with a parliamentary system where, especially at the regional state level, we have much more parliamentary. So there is a strong argument for parliament that it creates consensus, it's more participatory, it enables opposition party to be more useful, it makes the president less powerful to threaten the system. But the soft side is that a country that is trapped in underdevelopment, parliamentary system might not give you the impetus for quick economic transformation.
Thank you very much. Just to wrap it up, I think there is a consensus around the fact that the current system that we practice is not yielding the desired effect. I mean, Dr. Amadi is right. The reason for the adoption that was given for the presidential system in 1979 is aspirational. But now we've had, altogether in our history, 29 years of presidential system out of the 36 that we have for democracy. No development, no significant development. So maybe we can come to that agreement that, look, we need to try something else. The other consensus seems to be that around the fact that values have declined sharply, and we can, that attends our experience and encounter with presidential system and the military. So in a way, we can say loosely that the military and the experience that we've had for 29 years with the presidential system is connected to the drop and the decline in our values. So it leaves us with no other option than to give this idea of an homegrown parliamentary system some kind of a chance. Because one thing it will do, and I will say this last word, it will terminate this idea of an imperial presidency. We have a system where the president can comfortably sit 4 years or 8 years in the villa. He is not compelled to engage with people. There's nothing that compels him at all. That will not be in a parliamentary system. Whoever is the head of government will have to account, will have to take questions. He cannot escape being transparent, and he cannot escape being accountable. So that might be a good place for us to start. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. It's been a wonderful time to meet you.
Please, can you turn on my mic? Thank you very much. Please, can we have this panel stand right in front of the stage here for a group photograph? Whilst this is being done, I'd like to recognize Comrade Dr. Duke Alamboye K, President, Nigerian Youth Organization. Barrister Ismail, former APC youth leader, would like to appreciate you. And we also recognize the presence of Honorable Bob Teo, member 9th House of Assembly, House of Representatives, as well as Honorable Olashupo Abiodun, member House of Reps, 8th Assembly, and he was in charge of legislative compliance. I'd like to welcome all of you. Thank you so very much for honoring us with your esteemed presence. We'd like to move on now very quickly, and we have time enough for just 4 interventions. These 4 interventions will be one from this end, one from the right wing of this hall, and then we'll take 2 from the students that are here. So just indicate if you have questions, students. The students first. We have 1 hand up. Please, let's pay rapt attention. Let's pay rapt attention. We have 2 hands up already, but we're taking 2. So you and the man behind you. And then we'll take 2 questions from the youth. That will just... Honorable Olashupo. Okay, fine. You give the roving microphone to the man with the red tie. Please, for the records, your name and what institution you represent.
Okay, thank you very much, moderator. My name is Comrade Duke Alamboye. I'm the president, Nigerian Youth Organization. First of all, let me thank the organizers for even finding it deemed to include youths in this they are doing, in this program we are in here. I want to quickly thank the organizers again for bringing this discourse to light. We have seen that over time, the system of government we are practicing is failing, and that is the truth. As the day goes by, youths and people of this country are beginning to lose confidence
watching our live
in this
coverage
country
of the National Dialogue on Homegrown
So
Parliamentary System of Government at the Aregbesola Center in Abuja, the nation's capital. Please stay with us as we return to our other programming for the day. On top of the hour, we'll bring you news tracks.
Homegrown parliamentary system of government. Yes, most